Hey everybody, this is Matt Walker, creator of the Choir Director Corner, here to answer your choral conducting questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you're excited to be here. I know I'm excited to hear, fully caffeinated, ready to go. So it's a wonderful day here. It's sort of a funny story. We've had our street has been blocked off with traffic cones for the past 2 weeks. They've been looking to do some road construction. Haven't done anything for 2 weeks, and here today they showed up about 30 minutes ago and started in on some work. So if midway through I leave the screen here for a second, it's just because the construction's getting a little loud and I'm closing the door. So trying to get some nice light in as it's a beautiful day. So talking with some of you over email, over social media, about your questions, your challenges in your teaching, and one of the things that came up quite a bit was conducting. And so I've got a wide variety of questions to talk with you today about, and hopefully we can get them all covered. If you're there watching today and you've got a question, feel free to submit that, and if I don't get to it here today, then maybe we'll do another one of these if people find it helpful, and we'll tackle those questions at another time. So our first question today comes from Christina. And so Christina asks, my conducting style is basically keeping the beat. I'd like to be more expressive so I can get more out of my singers. And so my initial reaction to Christina's question was twofold. One, you don't have to necessarily do more than a basic 4 pattern in order to be expressive. A 4 pattern can be done very expressively, very musically. I think a lot of times directors, conductors, we tend to think it has to be overly elaborate with our gesture, and I just don't think that's the case. I think you can do, what some would call a basic pattern, but also do it very musically and very expressively. At the same time, I would encourage Christina and those of you that are searching for more expressivity in your conducting gesture to not be afraid to experiment. Now, I think that time to experiment comes in your preparation, not necessarily in rehearsal with your choirs. So, practicing conducting through your music on your own, practicing in front of a mirror, which many of us, we don't necessarily like to watch ourselves conducting, but I think it can be very informative as far as what we are showing our choir, what works, what doesn't. And so I think that's something that I would definitely suggest to Christina and to many of us who are always looking for our gesture to be a little bit more expressive. Moving on to the next question. Christine asks, or her challenge was keeping the beat while using expression in the other hand. I'm left-handed but was taught to conduct right-handed, so trying to conduct right-handed while doing expression with my left feels off. So I think a lot of conductors, a lot of people that teach choral conducting would say that yes, we want you to conduct with your right hand. Dr. Pete Eklund is someone that comes to mind. He did the Iowa All-State Chorus a number of years ago, and I believe it was him who said that he's actually left-handed, and so it was a struggle for him to learn to conduct with his right hand. And so every once in a while when his arm got tired, he would switch to his left hand in rehearsal, but still was predominantly conducting with the right hand. So that would be sort of a clarification and a first suggestion for Christine. But the other thing is I think left-handers to a certain extent have an advantage. I know myself being right-handed that when I go to use my left hand, I often feel like I'm overusing it. Or I'm just sort of using it to mirror what my right hand is doing, and I don't know if necessarily it's always as effective as it could be. So what my suggestion would be to those of us that are looking to make that left hand more effective, more relevant in our conducting, is to pick some spots in your music that you're looking at that you want to use your left hand as a point of emphasis. And then going back to the first question, then trying to hash that out in your own personal preparation, and just, again, conducting in front of a mirror and trying to see, doing different things, trying different things with your left hand as you're conducting, and seeing what you think is effective as you're watching yourself. And again, experimenting, but I like to have those spots sort of pre-planned when I go into a rehearsal. Where am I going to use that left hand, and how am I going to use it? What does that gesture look like? And so I like to have that ahead of time. And that way, you're a little less nervous as far as using it, and you don't end up using it too much or using it ineffectively. So going on to our next question here. This is from Allegra. Allegra, her question was, I was trained in piano performance and I didn't know I would end up in music education. I'm responsible for the orchestra and the choir, and switching between the two conducting styles is really difficult for me. Also, I don't have an accompanist for my choir rehearsals, so I generally am always at the piano during our class time. This means when we get to closer to the concert and I actually have a pianist and I'm standing in front of the choir, they don't really know what any of my gestures mean. It's really frustrating. So, one of the things that I would suggest to Allegra, and this is maybe more of a rehearsal management or rehearsal techniques thing, is trying to get away from that piano as much as you can, and not allowing your singers to sort of use that piano as a crutch. That's sort of what I see my singers doing, is that they're relying on that piano a little bit too much for their own part, and really not using their own brains to read the music that's in front of them. So other than giving starting pitch, with my choirs, we rehearse a lot, the majority of the time a cappella. And so getting into that emphasis, music reading, of music literacy, and sort of getting away from that piano. And then that allows me to sort of get in front of them a little bit, sort of get in their face a little bit, and try to show some of those things that Allegra is talking about, the dynamics, the phrasing, the consonants, and things like that. Especially because at the beginning, when singers have their music, what you're seeing is a lot of this. And so if you're just there at the piano playing parts, a lot of times they're just going to continue to do that until you really sort of make it a point of emphasis to really get in front of them and having them watch you as they've got the music in front of them, and then you can show them a lot of these other things. Now, I will say, when I've got a piece that's accompanied, often what I will do is I do have an accompanist, not on a regular basis. He is someone that comes in as we get closer to concert time, so for the few rehearsals prior to the concert. What I'll have him do early on is I'll have him make a recording of the accompaniment. He'll come in and work with me, and as I conduct, then he makes a recording of that piano part. And so then early on, we'll use that recording a couple of times as we're working through the music, but then I take that recording and that recording goes away. And we are working almost exclusively a cappella. And then towards the very end of that rehearsal process, I bring him back in for a few rehearsals, and then they can start to work with that accompaniment part. And I find that way the singers are a lot more prepared on their parts because they've learned that more thoroughly, more in depth. It's at sort of a deeper level of learning on their parts. And so when we bring that piano part back in, it usually works pretty seamlessly, unless it's something that's ultra complicated that takes a little bit more logistically to put it together. But they've got a better understanding of it that way, and that allows me to get away from the piano, which honestly I'm not the greatest piano player anyway, not one of my strengths, so that allows me to do some other things with my singers. So a great question from Allegra. I think that's a question that a topic that a lot of people deal with. Our next question comes from Brian. Brian asks, what determines the use of a baton for conducting? Is it a size of ensemble, genre of music, performance venue? So the short answer to Brian's question is, do whatever you want. The choral conducting police are not going to come around and slap you on the wrist for using a baton or not using the baton. So that's sort of the short answer to that. Now a little bit more of a longer, in-depth answer to that. Really, when you're looking at it, if you're dealing with, say, an instrumental ensemble, that's probably a time where you are going to want to use a baton, because often those instrumentals are in their music, and so they're just looking up over the top of their music, and having that baton gives them a better sight of where you are in your conducting pattern. So that's one instance. I think Brian is right, where if it's a larger ensemble, a larger space, if your singers are further away from you, say like a festival chorus or something like that, I think that's definitely an instance where you can bring in the baton. And it's certainly up to you, but you do want to be in a situation, put your singers in a situation where they can see your gesture clearly. Now, I've known some conductors that even with a very small ensemble, they would use a baton. They're more comfortable with it. They feel like they can be more musical with that. Some other conductors that I know that they don't necessarily like a baton. They feel like they can be more expressive without one. I was even at a band concert recently, my daughter's 6th grade band concert, and the band director has taught for many, many, many years and did not use a baton. And so that was a first for me, an actual instrumental conductor not using a baton. But I think, again, getting back to my short answer, do what fits your style, and also what is going to give your singers, in whatever situation you're in, the best information. Now, I will say genre-wise, that can have a little bit of an effect as well. For instance, certain genres like Renaissance music, spirituals, there just seems to be something a little bit odd about using a baton. It's not something I've seen often. But things from the classical period, the Baroque period, you see those where oftentimes the conductor will use a baton. But again, using your best judgment and really whatever feels most comfortable to you. So another great question from Brian. This next question comes from Bradley. Bradley's question is, how can I strengthen my conducting without going to grad school? And I think, some of you who have been doing this quite a while, maybe longer than I have, would say that, back in the old days, grad school was really the only way where you could get some significant training as far as professional development for choral conducting. And nowadays, we have all of these different resources, both electronic or otherwise, that can help us, those of us with that so important growth mindset, to continue to develop and improve our skills. So just a few suggestions for Bradley. Number one, sort of the obvious one, books and DVDs. If you're on J.W. Pepper, or if you go to Santa Barbara Music Publishing, are two of the sites that I've looked at quite a bit, where there are a ton of conductor resources. Gia Music is another one, with a lot of James Jordan's material. So his books and DVDs I've used several of those, and those seem to be really good. I believe he's got one of his evoking sounds books, I believe, is the fundamentals of choral conducting. And that also has a video that goes with it. So for those of you looking at maybe a book or a DVD to look at some conducting topics, that would be the first one that I would recommend. Other things that you should maybe look at: summer workshops. I know here in Iowa we have a great ICDA summer convention with all sorts of different workshops and clinics, and it seems like there's always at least one every summer that focuses on conducting. And so looking at your state American Choral Directors Association, looking at their convention whenever that might be, if it's during the year, if it's during the summer like Iowa's is, and seeing if they've got any conducting workshops that would be part of their convention. There are also some other conducting clinics and workshops across the country. I know Rodney Eichenberger has done one in the past. That seems to be pretty popular, and so just getting on Google summer conducting workshops, and you will find some things that you might find useful. Another suggestion would be private lessons. If you've got a university or college that's close to you, connecting with their staff there, with their choral conductors, and seeing if that's something, private conducting lessons, that they would have time in their schedule to work with you. I had a friend last year who was doing an honor choir and wanted to polish up their conducting skills a little bit, and so connected with a college professor here in the area and went and worked multiple times on that repertoire for that honor festival that she was doing, and was able to not only work that repertoire but really sort of talk about some of those topics in choral conducting that she had some questions on and wanted to work on. So that might be something that you can fit in your schedule if you've got someone that's close to you in your area. So another great question from Bradley. I love to see when people have that growth mindset and want to continue to improve. The next question comes from, I believe it's Evie, and her challenge, I guess it was, is getting the choir to sing softly. Boy, I bet that's something that a lot of choir directors can relate to. So often when my choirs, I find they're not singing as softly or paying enough attention to dynamics really in any way. Oftentimes it's just because they're just not watching. Whether they are so ingrained in their music, if it's early on in the learning process, whatever it might be, or they're just not paying attention. I deal with teenagers, and that certainly would not be a big surprise if they were just not paying attention. So one of the things that I do with them, I've actually got a couple of warm-ups, and you can find these if you go to my website, www.choirdirectorcorner.com, and the top menu there, one of the things that's listed is 50 Awesome Choir Warm-Ups webinar. And so there are a number of warm-ups in that webinar, and there's also a cheat sheet that goes with it that lists all of the warm-ups along with some audio and video links. Some warm-ups in that I think would fit this perfectly. One is what I call 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, conduct. That comes from my son, who is 6, and it seems everything we do has a countdown to it of some sort. So this is an exercise where the choir sings a repeated pattern just on those numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, and then it keeps going on and on. It just continues to cycle. But what I have them do along with it is I have them conduct. And so I will conduct with 2 hands, Because, if they're left-handed, I say by all means, you just conduct left hand and you can mirror whichever hand you are, whatever is your dominant hand. But what we will do is, going sort of by the standard idea that the smaller the gesture, the softer the choir should sing. The larger the gesture, the louder the choir should sing. And then obviously you can affect tempo with this as well. So this really emphasizes them watching, and not just watching, but really following you. Like they really have to pay attention. So they're mirroring you, but they are also imitating vocally what you are showing. So for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. My singers have a lot of fun with it. We end up laughing by the end of the warm-up. But if I do that warm-up at the start of rehearsal, I will find that all I have to do in the middle of that rehearsal is just like, remember that warm-up, remember to watch. And I just have to mention it to them, and then suddenly that clicks on in their brain, and so then they're able to take that idea and they're able to relate that to the repertoire that we are working on. And they become much more aware, but they place much more of an emphasis on the dynamics there. So if you're struggling to get them to sing softly, that's one of the warm-ups that you could use, and then take that warm-up and relate that to whatever repertoire you are doing in your rehearsal. So hopefully then they will follow you when your gesture suddenly gets smaller. You can remind them of that warm-up that they just did. So a great question from Evie. And it looks like that's about all we have time for today. So if you've got some other questions, feel free to post them in the comments of this video. This video will go up on the Choir Director Corner Facebook page. I'll also be placing this in the I'm a Choir Director Facebook group. So if you're in that group as well, you can find it. If you weren't able to attend this afternoon, sorry if you're still in your teaching year. Stay strong. You're almost there at the end of the school year. It will be there as well. Feel free to place any questions you might have in the comments there, and we'll be able to take those comments and I can respond to them and incorporate those hopefully into the next video that we do. So before I let you go, just a couple of places where you can find me and find this wonderful community that is the Choir Director Corner. I mentioned it earlier, but our website, www.choirdirectorcorner.com. You can also find us on Facebook. Obviously here, the Choir Director Corner Facebook page. There's also a Facebook group. And so if you go to the Choir Director Corner page, over on the left of the screen, there's groups. And if you click on that, you can request to be a member of the closed group. That is the Choir Director Corner community Facebook group. You can also find us, the web link, the specific web link for that group is www.choirdirectorcornercommunity.com. And you can also find us over on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, just search for Choir Director Corner. I've got some some videos of some different choir warm-ups, some short videos that you might be able to take and immediately put into practice. And I'll be placing this video over there on YouTube as well. So thank you so much for joining me today. We hope that you will join us on Facebook, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. And again, best of luck with the rest of your school year. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.